and I thank everyone who's here. Our guest speaker for today is Jackson Nichols, and he is a graphic designer, photographer, and filmmaker. And he's going to share a little bit about his career, his portfolio, and his excitement for the creative process with us today. There is a page in each of your classes, so the people here are either from the careers in the visual arts class, GID 60, or from the portfolio class GID 60. And so you can explore some of his work, both the books that he's done, and then some of the trailer for a video that he's currently working on. I've known Jackson for a long time. We worked on a number of projects together, both interviewing historic photographers for a video project that is ongoing, working on exhibitions together, and then some of his books, I collaborated and worked with him on some parts of those too. They also worked together on a book called Resonance, which is going to be coming available soon. So lots of things that we've done together. So welcome, Jackson.
Hello.
So I'm going to unshare and then leave it to you so you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, what you see your career as, and anything you want to share.
Okay. Well, starting out, basically, I started in photography my senior year, design as a environmental study major at Sonoma State in 1974. And my senior year, a girlfriend brought home a book of Ansel Adams. And I was doing some photography basically for plant taxonomy. We were doing some field studies, and rather than carry a plant press, I was carrying a camera and to photograph and identify plants. But when I saw Ansel Adams, I was really intrigued. And so I got the degree in environmental studies and worked for a while as a ranger's aide out in Bodega Bay. But all the time I was starting to really get into photography, in black and white photography. I acquired an old 4x5 Crown Graphic and started to work with 4x5 film and developing film. And this was like 74 through 76 or so. Moved to, that was in Petaluma. Then I moved to Crockett, California, which is up by Vallejo. And, was working there. I really, when I graduated, it was in a specialized kind of degree. So there weren't a lot of jobs out there for that degree at the time. And so I ended up basically working as a custodian and school bus driver in Crockett for a number of years, but always with the intent of supporting my photographic habit. And so that's kind of been my career, is kind of photography has been sort of number one, my passion, and anything else that I was doing was sort of to support that outcome. So I moved from Crockett down to Fremont and got a job with Hewlett Packard, basically as a material handler, just throwing parts up on the shelves. But the division that I was working at had a in-house newsletter that because I was doing photography and I've been doing photography for a long time, I became the photographer for the newsletter. And from that, then after working with that, on the newsletter, and then the editor of the newsletter went on maternity leave. And so I edited that newsletter for like 3 months. So, and I had a little bit of graphics background from, way back in high school. And so between those two things, then I applied for a job as a graphic designer at Hewlett Packard at Santa Clara division. And so with that limited experience, they were, promoting hiring from within. So I got a job as a graphic designer at Hewlett Packard. And I worked there for 8 years and became senior graphic designer. And during that time, also because I had educational assistance, I financed my second degree at San Jose State in graphic design, was paid for by Hewlett Packard because they would cover the tuition and the materials and everything. So I basically worked into a graphic design job. And so I had that job for about 8 years.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I think it's something that we're all going to be asking. And, how does someone get into being a graphic designer in the modern world? And though this was a little while ago, the fact that you were willing to do something, you took an opportunity to start working on the newsletter, and that actually built itself up to a position of using some of the skills that you enjoy is, you know, that kind of patience and finding opportunity that I think we all have to hear about when we're trying to figure out what we're doing next.
Yeah, exactly. And it's you know, the Silicon Valley has changed a lot. You got to remember, this was like, I started as a graphic designer in 1984. That was, the Mac was just barely coming out. And so my job was, I was doing basically print brochures, sales brochures. And in
Mhm.
those days, I sat next to the typesetter and I would sketch out in paper, or yeah, basically pencil on paper, what I wanted, you know, where I wanted the type to be, the size and the style. I would give it to the typesetter. She would run the galleys of type. I would take that type and paste it up and then send it out to make film. And it
Right.
was a very long process. There was a whole process, color separations, film making, plate making, proofing, and then you would take a color chromalin proof to the press and stand with the pressman until they got all the color right and everything like that. And so my job evolved from having a number of different parts of it to, and different responsibilities, the film strippers, the color separators and everything, to once I got the Mac, and it took a while to get a Mac into Hewlett Packard. It would, because they had their own machines. So it was a real fight to get a Mac in there, but the vectors in the time were only about 80 to 85% compatible with Adobe software. And so there was a lot of glitches. So once we got the Macs in, and it took a, you know, act of Congress basically to get them in there, but I started on a Mac 2. And it was a big difference. But then all of a sudden, all those responsibilities became mine. The photographer would you know, I still did a lot of art direction for, you know, the division I was in was test and measurement, and so they're basically just boxes. But we would do some beauty shots, and then there was a lot of type and a lot of specs and stuff in those. But I would basically, you know, get that information, like the separations still would come in as files, but all those responsibilities became mine. And, you know, it's just evolved more and more to where the more capabilities that machine can do, the more responsibilities are basically piled onto you. So, and also because of that, then timelines become much shorter because you don't have the wait time between each of those vendors. And
Yeah.
even, you know, going to press now, we would have to, you know, get film and have plates made and all that. Now all that stuff, you deliver the file to the printer, it images directly to the press, and you know, they're running in no time, and the color is incredible. I mean, there's not all the color adjustments, the fine tuning, because the presses are so high tech now that basically once everything goes on the press, there's very little adjustment that needs to happen. Now, I was always down doing press checks, but now, I mean, you know, and then later on in my career, I didn't even do press checks anymore unless it was a really critical job, because the color was so spot on that, you know, we really didn't have to do those anymore. And the number of impressions went from, like, say 7,000 impressions an hour to about 12,000, 15,000 impressions an hour on these presses. It's like, even a big job is on and off so quick that the turnarounds have really improved drastically.
So when you talk about impressions, I know some people here have had more graphic design than others. So you're talking about actually how many pieces of paper, if it's a print job,
Yes.
come off in an hour. That
Yes,
it's
exactly.
multiplying so fast.
Yeah, yeah. And so some of the jobs for Hewlett Packard anyway would be 5,000, 10,000 run, you know, so it wouldn't be on the press very long anyway. And then that would really be cut down.
Right.
Let me open up, let me see here.
You were going to share some of the work that you've done over.
Yeah, I'll share some of the print work that I did. So let's see if I can do this up. Let's see here.
So you click share screen.
Okay, hold on.
And I'll just, while Jackson's getting that up, I'll just let you know that if you have a question, you can put it in the chat. You can also raise your hand in the participants. So if you go, you should be able to, you'll see a little raise your hand button. And I will, after Jackson shares some things, and I'll come back. If you have the pictures in the way, you can go in the top of the pictures and minimize them so that you can see the screen more better. Okay, Jackson.
Okay, so after Hewlett Packard, I was there for, like I say, 8 years. And it was when things were starting to downsize a little bit. And it was really the first time that Hewlett Packard had downsized. And so before they did mandatory layoffs, they had a program where it was a voluntary severance. And so having 8 years there, or having 12 years total there, they were going to give me a year's salary to leave. So that was just more than I could pass by. So I then left Hewlett Packard and joined a small lighting company called Prescolite. They're in Alameda. And they're a very small operation, but they've been going since after the war, the 40s. And they made downlights. I don't know if you can see, like, there's these kind of downlights here, which, you know, they're hidden in the ceiling, and you just see the fixture and the bulb coming down from underneath the ceiling. They're decorative, but they had like parking lot luminaires and all kinds of different lighting styles and everything. So, and they had every year they had a trade show called Light Fair. And so this was a catalog. I don't know, can you see this?
Yeah, we can see
okay.
the now is everything, and then
yes, exactly.
the light. So it's actually, it could be a 8.5 by 11 folder flyer.
Yes, yeah,
okay.
It's a brochure for a Light Fair. So it's 8.5 by 11, and this is the cover here, and then this is one of the spreads. And so basically I came up with the design for it, and then I art directed these photographs. This was really a great learning experience for me because I came in with the graphic design, and then also the experience of a photographer. And we had an in-house photographer that was really good that I worked with. Before I had done a lot of natural light photography, but very little studio work. We had a complete studio with a Sinar camera and everything. So we did all of our photography in-house. So I art directed these shots here. And then we did a lot of, this was for another product called Lightbox. Basically, you can see it in the upper corner here. This is kind of an artistic rendering of it. But we would also go on site and photograph some of the installations that, had our lighting in it. Like this one down here was a location up in Discovery Bay. It was a model home that we went in and photographed. This was another model home that we photographed, and then some lifestyle shots that I, purchased. So the design was to show the lifestyle of how this particular light would work, some of the different trims that you could add to this light. And then so that would be one spread. And then the second spread would be the light coverage and how they might be used, and the kind of illumination that those fixtures would do. And this was like a 40-page brochure. It was also for a light show to, help, basically display the applications of these lights in a lifestyle sort of setting. So this one I went up to Portland, Oregon for a web press up there because they did 40,000 on this run. And it was like an all-night web check or press check. So it started at 11 in the evening, and I think it ended at 4 in the morning. Because once they start a web press is like any other press, but instead of doing individual sheets of paper going through, it does a big web of paper. And these things do 20,000 impressions an hour. I mean, that paper is just running through there. So press checks have to be very quick. They only stop it for a little while, and then once they get up and running, it's done. And so this was a very interesting job. Also, branching off of that, I had the idea. I was painting my house, and I went to the hardware store, and they had these little chips of paint, samples. And so I came up with the idea, well, why wouldn't we take those images and do them on tabletop cards? And then, so these are the different applications, the different, places where you might use the different lighting. And then on the back of each of the card, depending on where it was, the lighting fixtures that could go there, And so there were like 8 or 10 of these cards, and I designed them so that they would have a tabletop sort of display. So it could be like at Home Depot or at your local hardware store. It could be, and then you could thumb through the cards, and for the application that you're looking for, then you could pull the card and have all the all the different lighting applications that for each of those rooms. And then this is a what a futility, exercise of futility. Basically, this is all the lighting fixtures that they offered, and for the Lightbox line. And so it's an 11 by 17 sheet of paper that folds in half down the front here, and then folds into thirds this way. And so both sides are covered with these lights. But it was just the fact that I got them all on there was I was pretty proud of that.
So there are these jobs where you just have to do them.
You just have to do them.
It's not going to be beautiful. It's not something that's maybe going to be in your portfolio in the long run, but you did it.
Yes, exactly. And, I mean, that's part of the job. You don't always get, these kinds of jobs. This was a great job to do because, I mean, we got to go on location. We got to, basically it's a nice clean design. It's not very, it's not all packed full of product and everything. Like the only product that you have are really on the lines here. So it was very much kind of a showpiece where this is just utilitarian, but
Right.
it looks okay for what it is,
Right.
so.
Right.
After Prescolite, I spent 5 years at Prescolite, and then they basically were sold, and so I was out of a job. So they eliminated the graphics department, and so then a friend of mine who I had worked with at Hewlett Packard was working at Oracle, and he heard that I was available, and so I got on as a graphic designer at Oracle, and in there, basically it's the worldwide marketing, but a lot of what they did was trade show work. And that's basically was my specialty. That's kind of what I was hired. I did a little bit of print there, but mostly it was trade show work. And every year we did the Oracle Open World, and we would take over Moscone Center, the Moscone Center South, Moscone Center North, and Moscone Center West. And we would take it over and brand the heck out of it. And that was our job. The group that I was in, there were about 12 people to put this whole thing together. Just the signage part of it.
So interesting, because I often think about everything we see has to be designed by someone.
Yes.
And you don't always, I think people in this class may think that, but to pay more attention to it, that there's, someone had to make that happen, and it's a designer of some kind.
Yeah, it was a group of designers, but we had, I mean, the next slide will show more. I mean, we took the place over and we branded the heck out of it. I had and I was basically in charge of doing the large banners, producing them, designing them. And so I would do it. I had two other designers working underneath me, junior designers, and we would just take the brand and apply it to these different dimensions. Right. We would do it all on the screen in Adobe Illustrator, but do it to size. But I mean, these things, you really have to imagine how big they really go, because they're just on your screen in Adobe
Right.
Illustrator. So we would do all these banners, and then we would go supervise their hanging. And then we also did, you look down here at the information booths and stuff, and we did all these designs as well. So it's really pretty amazing to see. And then this one, we did a lot of photography for these as well. And I did a lot of photography for executive portraits and things as well. And they would appear in Oracle Magazine or, Profit Magazine, something like that. So, but for this one, they had a program called Meet the Guru. And these are like their Oracle gurus for each of their application lines. And so I would work with a photographer from San Francisco, and we would scout out. These are all shot in different locations around the Oracle towers. And we would scout out the locations and then bring the particular guru to that location and do a portrait of them. And then this one at Ken Jacobs, we also had a backup where we would do just a brown background, so if none of these, so it would be a backup. But so then I took these Meet the Gurus, and then I designed these footers for them, and then basically made these big banners for them. These are double-sided. There's 3 different gurus on the backside, and I think we had about a dozen gurus all told. And so that was it was a great opportunity for art direction. And a lot of these were either on location. So like for this one, we had a big light that basically, you know, overpowered the sun so we could get this kind of a daylight balanced look to it. But really a great experience, a great photographer to work with. I mean, he had no secrets, you know, anything I wanted to know, anything we wanted to try, you know, we tried out. It was really great. And then this one here, this is another exercise in futility. There's like 150 different logos on this logo banner. Not all of the customers, but many of the customers of Oracle software, that we requested their logos and then made this huge banner. I think this is 90 feet by 20 feet. And it's 3 or 4 panels sewn together. So that's basically what I did at Hewlett Packard for about 5 years. And we would do, this is just San Francisco and this was just Oracle Open World. There was also Oracle Apps World, which would happen. So Oracle Open World was in like November. Apps World, which we would do the same thing to the San Diego Convention Center, basically take it over, brand the heck out of it, and you know, do the whole thing. And so it would be 4 months later in February. So we were very busy. And then there would be a little bit of slack time in summer where we could sort of get caught up and then do the whole thing again. So, but this is the variety of things that I was doing. I mean, I took and I wrapped a bus. This is all vinyl. That's the wrap for the bus. And this is Oracle Apps World. You can see it's a circular logo versus the square open world logo. And then there's the, you know, the you know, pole flags, the bus shelters, even taxi tops, you know, so all that stuff I would design and then just send out to the different vendors. This is called out of house advertising. So it was pretty intensive. It was at times really, they have, at the base of the towers, there's 5 restaurants. Each of the towers has a restaurant. One of those restaurants stays open 24 hours because, and I ate there at 1 o'clock in the morning a lot of times just to, you know, because, you know, you're working very late sometimes to make these deadlines. And then at other times you would have a little time to get caught up. But yeah, Oracle is, I'm a veteran at 5 years there. But, and then, because I started working with the photographer, and then I also started working, part of the worldwide marketing was the Oracle, the magazines, Profit and Oracle Magazine. And so they were in the same department. And so I would get with the art director from Oracle Magazine and shoot some of the feature stuff inside. You know, it could be like just a little tabletop of something, anything that he might need, rather than bringing in an outside photographer. He could just ask me to do it and I would have it in an hour, you know. And so this was the first cover that he had asked me to shoot, and cracking the code of life. And so the idea was to, you know, basically, I think it was around the time of Aliens, when Aliens first came out, and that first opening shot of Aliens with the beam coming out from inside the egg. Well, I just cracked an egg and I put a really heavy light on behind it so that it would shine in, and then I had a 4x5 and I just shot it and it came out really great. And so then they put it on the cover of the magazine, and then they entered it in a Western publishers, it's a Maggie award. And so I got a Maggie award for this cover for a best cover for a trade publication. So it was like gaining a little Emmy. There was a big gathering down in Southern California, and I got up and I got the trophy and everything. So it was really, you know, it's pretty amazing. So after that, because of that success, then I actually started a studio, a photo studio inside the department there. They had a spare room that I converted into a studio, bought some studio lighting, and started doing some tabletop stuff for Oracle and Profit magazines. And then in 2003, I was asked to accompany the editor of Profit magazine. He was doing some interviews of some customers around the world, so he was leaving Beijing. I met him in Taipei, Taiwan, and we photographed customers there. He would interview them, and then I would photograph them either in the location or maybe just kind of a portrait shot to go along with the article that he was doing. So I went to Taipei. From there, we flew to Sydney, Australia, and then down to Melbourne, Australia, did a few more interviews, and then over to Auckland, New Zealand, and then home. And it was like a 10-day trip, and that was pretty amazing. That was really amazing. So.
So just to give you a time check, we have about 10 more minutes for you to share with.
Oh,
I have
okay.
so many good questions in the chat. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. So after that, I left Oracle. I joined Abbott Diabetes Care. Again, this is a layout of one of their trade show booths. I was doing a lot of trade show and a lot of print stuff there. Again, for Abbott, they had a corporate guidelines, the big A, and the sign off, and so this is just basically really nuts and bolts kind of design, and it comes with the territory. This is a shelf card for a new program for a copay from a pharmacist. This was an interesting book, a guidebook for patient advisory board. Basically, they wanted to bring some actual diabetes patients in and interview them about how our products were going. So this was a handbook to go along with that. Black Barbershop outreach program that they did. I did a poster for that in Atlanta. And then finally I ended up in Tesla. And this was the kind of stuff we're doing at Tesla. It was more nuts and bolts, mostly signage, wayfinding and signage. And just these kinds of, this is a ID card for a 3-dimensional ID card for a conference room, some vinyl applications. I wrapped some I did some vinyl for the Tesla security cars. Just anything. This was a big poster that went up in their cafeteria about why safety matters. And then some volunteer work. I had done a volunteer with the year before, so pro bono work, and so they brought me back the next year for their catalog for their corporate brochure. And so basically it was really a fun piece. I did the photography in this and did the design. It was basically talking about them. Their annual report is what it is. So then there's their profits, then there's all the contributors and everything, and in the back. And then this was this is my own stuff. Ramona Vieira was a fado singer, Portuguese fado singer, and she had an album coming out, so I did the album cover and the photography for that.
So this would be freelance in addition to what you were doing for Tesla and other projects.
Yes, exactly. This is freelance work. Yeah. So I don't know if we want to talk about the photography side of things.
Well, I'll go to the questions if that's okay.
Yes,
Jack.
please.
So the first question was, does someone need to be good at photography to be good at graphic design?
They feed off of each other. Yeah, you don't have to be. If you get into graphic design much, and especially like, there's a lot of photography sort of solutions there. Art direction can be a natural way to go, and it's like, you're going to get it one way or the other because you're going to be around photographers. You're going to want to direct them for what you want, and that's what they're there for, So the more you learn.
In your career, you probably only did, maybe you did half of the photography for your different projects. You weren't
or half or less.
Yeah.
Half or less for those, yeah.
But
a lot of it. But knowing photography really helps you with art direction, because then you understand what photography is capable of and what it's incapable of, So
right.
It would be helpful.
Okay. Do you want to unshare your screen so we can see your face better, Jackson?
Oh, okay. So
on the top, there's a red button, and we can go back to it if anyone has.
Stop share.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We can see your face.
Okay.
Okay. So the next question was, what are things in graphic design that have remained the same from your time to the present versus the fact that the technology has changed so very dramatically?
I think a good understanding of typography. That's really the basis for it, and an understanding of color.
Mm-hmm.
And most important of all, detail orientation, because there's so many details. With you being responsible for everything, I think you have to be really detailed. And, you know, my early instructors at San Jose State would always say the biggest qualification for being a graphic designer is being detail oriented. But a good understanding of photography, a good understanding of color is really helpful.
Okay. How important is it to have a bachelor's degree in graphic design?
Um, I'm not sure. You know, you can pick up a lot of these programs, um, but I think the design fundamentals you would get probably and exposure to a different variety of graphic design. Yeah, I think a degree is pretty important now. And also, if you're going to be in the corporate environment, you need a degree. It doesn't matter where it is. My first degree when I started at Hewlett Packard was in environmental studies.
But having a
But
bachelor's is what was important.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
but then it also helped me because when I went for the graphic design degree, I had all of the lower division already completed. So
Right. And what programs do you find most important in your field?
I would say the big three is Adobe Creative Suite, Adobe, you know, InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. Those are the big ones. If you're going to do video work, then Adobe Premiere is probably still the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then After Effects. Lightroom is also real good, although you're much better at Lightroom, Kate, than I am. I still use Photoshop a lot because I've been using Photoshop for so
Right.
long.
Right.
But it is a much better program for cataloging than Photoshop is. Photoshop is more photo manipulation, and has that whole other aspect in Lightroom for cataloging. So.
And what advice would you give to your younger self looking back?
Oh man, that's a really good one. Um, be probably more detail oriented. It took me a while to really get that. I'm not. It really took a lot of effort to get that discipline. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, it's been a very varied and but pretty fun career.
Yeah. So there's a question about your schedule because you talked about some of these really long days. What's the average pace? And what's your daily schedule? What would your daily schedule be like when you were with one of the companies as an actual graphic designer?
Normally, it would be. It depends. The job is project driven, and so if there are short deadlines, like say for open world coming up, we would be there until 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was another group that actually brought their sleeping bags, but that sort of stopped. That was a little extreme, but we would, you know, often be there. I'd be there till 6, 7, 10 at night, depending on you know where we were and things. The daily, say a day schedule would be in the morning, get there and read the emails, find out what's hot, try and address that. Then there'd be a late morning meeting, a production meeting. Um, and we would go over, we would review each of the areas and then maybe probably another meeting in the afternoon. And in the middle of that, then you would be trying to get some work done and put out fires. So actually after 6 o'clock, when things quieted down, was in the real work that got done. So I would say a lot of it, during the day is just fighting fires, and then in the evenings, you would get some work done.
So how and where to search for the first job in graphic design?
Oh, how and where to? You know, I had some notes about. You know, I would say by creating a creative network, getting to know people, um, you know, volunteer at things, join groups, join clubs, talk to classmates. Let me see, all but one of my jobs came from somebody that I knew. The only job that wasn't was at Prescolite. And I answered a one ad in the paper for that one, but it's a small company. Now it seems like jobs come from who you know. Um, and if you volunteer or even doing some pro bono jobs, something like that, to get your name out there, that seems to me the best way to land a job. I couldn't have followed the career path now that I did when I was younger, but
Well, no, the field has changed quite a bit. We know that. But your Tesla job you got probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
5 years, more like 7 years ago. I think I've been out of that for a couple of years. Again, that was basically a friend of mine who had a small print and specialty shop got a contract with Tesla through somebody that he knew. And they were the manager for signage and wayfinding. And so when he got that job, he immediately turned to me and goes, "I need a designer," because they were trying to do it, but the printer who was printing his stuff goes, "I can't do this," So then I came in, and that was full time for 5 years. And another thing, all of my jobs were either I live in Fremont, and my jobs were either at Redwood City, Santa Clara, or Alameda. So for 20 something years, I was commuting at least 25 miles each way. So that's something that you have to add into your day, and especially now with the traffic, except with the COVID-19, it's like normally traffic is something that has to be allowed for. And to the my last job, Tesla's about 2 miles from my house, so I could just about walk down there, and so that was kind of nice.
So is there generally a lot of bureaucracy from the C-suite or other departments in the in-house companies that alters your design team's creative process?
Now, if you're in the corporate environment, there's going to be standards and guidelines, okay? And so that can be stifling to creativity on one end, but then it can be, really challenging, and you can, be very creative within those guidelines. And I was able to do some pretty neat stuff within guidelines. I even created some guidelines and refreshing some of those at Abbott where I worked. So
right.
I don't think it can seem limiting, but within that framework, you can have quite a bit of creativity. If you have a good idea, people are going to go for it.
So since you've transitioned and worked at different companies, how competitive is the job market in terms of finding jobs?
Very competitive.
Hard for an average designer to find another job if they were in a company that was being sold or being, things like that.
I think it's really competitive now. There's, the skills in the software programs. It's almost, you might find a niche within a certain software application, but I think it's very competitive now, and just in general, not only in graphic design, but anywhere in the Bay Area. This is where the jobs are, so this is where people are going to come to get this job. So
right. So for wayfinding, who designs where the signs need to be? Does someone say, we need a sign here and you work on the sign? Or do you work on the whole navigation process? And where would these signs be most helpful? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, we would work with the signage person. And a lot of times they had a specific area that they wanted to brand. And so we would, put a large sign or banner above that area just so that people could find it, because, the manufacturing floor is a huge area. And so if you have signposts to get to certain areas, that's what we would help do. Other areas, we would basically direct people to a certain area, like I'm trying to think, like they had a store, a Tesla store within sort of the center of the manufacturing area. So we would do some wayfinding to get them there. But sometimes we would design it, but we would always be working with the manager of the wayfinding to, come up with a solution. And then we would go ahead and produce the signage.
Okay. How important is it to have skills in management and marketing?
That's one of the things I was going to say. It's like nowadays, especially if you want to get an edge, you would get it like a bachelor's in business or an MBA or something like that, because that's going to help you wherever you go. And so that was probably be one of the things that if I was starting over again, I would probably get more business oriented. And because it looks good on the resume as well, to somebody who's not a designer that might, still be looking to hire you, that might put you over the top if you understood more about business.
So someone asked for you to talk about your film project. The film looks interesting and it looks like you're doing some drone photography. What kind of gear did you use? How many people are you working with? And how is the transition from still photography into documentary filmmaking?
Yeah, that's simple. um, I got into video photography because I was photographing a Forcado group in bloodless bullfighting in the valley, and I wanted to demonstrate more about what it is. You know, you can't communicate what it is with stills. I tried doing a flip book, and and then I ended up doing getting into video, and then that just kind of took off, and I was doing a lot of video for that, and then um, I was doing. I just wanted to interview like different artists, like you know, Kate. We did the interview with Greta, and it was just like I was just starting to explore things. I wanted to tell some stories. I wanted people to be able to tell their stories, and uh, and then the last one basically sort of came as a surprise when Oliver asked me to go to Mongolia and do film a video of a young eagle huntress that he had filmed. He had photographed still photographs of a couple years before. So we put together a rough script and went over there, and then just started doing a lot of filming. The drone footage that we got was actually done by another participant in the workshop, which then she lent us for the video. But I had borrowed Oliver's video, and I've been flying it for the past couple of weeks up in the hills, and because we were planning on going back to Mongolia and sort of completing that story. And but then with the COVID virus outbreak, all that, you know, disappeared. So probably won't be going this year, but anyway, I still played with his drone because we're going to use that in some of the other footage.
So you'll probably finish that video with what's available and have to be.
Yes, exactly. Because we shot a lot of footage. We had plans to get it in the wintertime, but yeah, we're going to finish it. It'll probably be about between 20 and 30 minutes. And yeah, I have the footage to do that and to tell the story decently.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But as far as transitioning, it was kind of a natural. I would say coming from still photography into video, you spend a little more time setting up the shot, and I think you have a really good feeling and understanding of composition than maybe if you came straight from film. That's just my take.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know if it's possible to have a career teleworking as a graphic designer? Are people working remotely in that?
Yeah, more and more, I would say, yeah. And that's what I'm doing now. I mean, I talked to a customer this morning in the Valley. They're a water purification company for agriculture. And basically, again, through that same, you know, Tesla contact. And I really haven't met her. You know, basically you know, I talked to her on the phone, the jobs come in over the computer, and then I will send proofs and then send the finished PDFs ready for print back to John to produce. So yeah, it's definitely, so you can live anywhere now and be a graphic designer.
Yeah. What about, it's expensive to live in the Bay Area. Do you have any idea of what the starting salary is? I know I have some links to outlooks and everything, but if you were, what would you think the starting salary for a junior graphic designer would be in the company?
Junior graphic, you know, I've seen, there's one site that I go to that reviews different areas, anywhere from like, I would say like 60 to 70, 60, yeah, $70,000, something like that for a starting. But yeah, I would check I'm not all that up to date on it. And I know that it varies a lot. You know, I've seen some where, like, you know, that advertise in the Bay Area for a graphic designer with 12 years experience around 70,000, 80,000, and it can be up over 100,000, you know. I know when I left Abbott, I was probably making, you know, like the high 90s, you know, so, and that had a number of years, you know, of experience, but then there was also bonuses there, so it pushed it over 100.
So for the Abbott Diabetes project that you did, would it be helpful if the graphic designer also had a medical background, or not needed for the job because others fulfill that need easily?
No, you know, it's interesting. I had no medical background. They train you in diabetes once you're a member there, and they have regular diabetes training classes that you go to and you're required to go to, basically, so you understand the product, the disease, and because a lot of people that are employees there either have diabetes or know somebody that has diabetes, and it's kind of altruistic in a lot of ways. They really have the feeling that they're helping people, you know,
Mhm.
and so they're very responsible about you know, your training and keeping you up to date with the developments.
Okay. And the last question I have right now is what are the greatest challenges in your job?
Greatest challenges, the greatest. Um, Staying fresh, I think, and staying current with um, graphic design trends. You
Mhm.
know, and it's like, I mean, graphic design is all around you, but the really cutting edge stuff you really got to pay attention to, and it changes. Styles change, sensitivities change, and you know, I a lot of my education, my real early exploration of that comes out of the 80s and 90s, you know, and so I keep up to date, but I could do more of that, you know, and it is because I split between photography and graphic design. Um, I tend to fall back on my standard practices, and I'm not pushing myself enough. So that would probably be it.
Okay. Okay. So that idea of keeping up to date as things are changing so quickly.
Yes, exactly.
And I did get a couple more questions after that one, so we're going to close up really soon here now. But how many years makes you a senior graphic designer? Is there a year or
Um,
experience or what is?
Probably 3 to 5, something like that. It all depends. Hewlett Packard was very generous. I think after like 3 or 4 years, I think they made me a senior designer. I don't know. It all depends on the firm.
Okay. And then what would you look for in a starting job? You've worked at all kinds of companies, corporate, small business, niche, and freelance. For a junior designer, is there a best place to start getting feet wet and learning the most?
Man, maybe for another graphic design house. Corporate design is you know, you can find a mentor there, but if you're a junior designer, I would say if you could get on with a design firm, a small design firm, you could learn a lot, you know, and I've known a lot of designers with small firms, and they take very good care of their people. And they're basically grooming them to take their jobs, and it's so in that way it's like this apprentice journeyman sort of relationship, you know. And so if you can get in something like that, that's probably would be ideal. And then, you know, same with photography. If you're a photographer's assistant, um, they will share everything, and then you'll get much more experience that way and much more variety than if you start in a bigger corporation. You know, corporations are for the security. I would say the you know, the freelance or the smaller design places would be more for the experience and the knowledge.
Okay. And so I hear that idea of gaining lots of different skills. Also, listening to your story, that kind of flexibility to take advantage of whatever opportunity comes and whatever your strength is. I mean, since you had the interest in photography, you ended up going that way, while another designer might have had an interest in typography and gone in a different direction or something
Yeah,
like
definitely.
that.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's listening for the story, I think, is really interesting. Okay, are there any other last questions before we close here? So I will ask the last question, which is, so I know you're on LinkedIn. You have a website, which mainly pushes is for your photography.
Hmm.
In terms of some of these people are going to be making a portfolio now or in a year from now, what have you found to be the most effective ways in terms of a portfolio to get it out to people
Ah,
in the modern days? I mean,
in
I
the
know there
modern
used to be
days,
a big
I'm not
book
that.
that you
I'm
would
not.
show people.
I, I would say online, just an
Yeah.
online portfolio, because people can refer to that. If you're going to have a sit down, though, I would say a small portfolio of pieces, not really big mounted pieces, but just something that's like tabletop that you can thumb through really quick. So you can
Right.
put some of your highlight pieces in there. Could even be a binder to help highlight some of your better pieces, and then also then refer them, have a card and have a leave behind. like a little 3.5 by 5 sort of printed piece, one of your best pieces with your contact information on it, and then a good business card to leave behind. And then the rest, if they want to look at more, then they can go to your website portfolio. But I think that's, from my perspective, that's probably the best way to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You started out our series of virtual guest speakers with great information and lots to think about. I thank everyone who's joined us today, and this will be saved as a recording and will be up on the website in a few days. So thank you, Jackson. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
talking. Bye.